Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Manufacturing Alliance podcast. This is another edition of Chat and Chow, but this is a bigger edition of Chat and Chow because instead of one guest, we have three. And I'm really excited about today because these are all people that I've met at different shows, different events, and different things. And they all have a different impression and impact on our industry. So before we get to that, I am Tony Demakis from Alliance Specialties and Laser Sales. And I'm shutting off the background noise. And we do everything that has to do with mold repair and maintenance. So plastic injection, molding or we do the mold finishing, laser welding, laser engraving, hot runner manifold cleaning, preventative mold maintenance. And we also just recently opened up a laser development center where we have laser welding, laser engraving, and laser cutting systems for all your applications. So that's us in a nutshell. Let me know how we can help. I am going to bring in the rest of our awesome panel today. There they are. Look at the beautiful people. If you guys can unmute yourselves, because for some reason, as an administrator, it doesn't let me do it. There we are. So we've got Caitlin, Max, and Christina. Caitlin, why don't you introduce yourself, and then we'll just do a little round the table here.
Sure. Caitlin DeMasellis. I'm a sales associate at Ideal Machinery. We're in Holly, Michigan, and we buy and sell used plastic injection molding machinery, as well as auxiliary equipment and parts.
Awesome. Max, you want to go next?
Sure, Tony, and glad to be back. Thank you very much for hosting this session, and congratulations on the new Laser Development Center. This sounds exciting for you guys. So my name is Max Preston, General Manager of Smart Attend. We're a Canadian-based Industry 4.0 systems designer and supplier for North America and beyond, specifically specializing in the plastic injection molding industry.
Nice. And this is Max and I's second time doing a show together. The first one was at NPE, where I got to meet him, and that was at a live show in the Gardner business media booth. And that leads us to the one and only Christina Fuges.
Hi, Tony. Thank you for having me. It's been a while, so this is nice to see you. And it's nice to meet Caitlin. And of course, I knew Max, so it's good to be here. I'm excited about this discussion. I am the editorial director with MoldMaking Technology magazine. Our October issues hit the street today. So I'm here to talk about that perspective on our issue, a workforce development issue today. So I'm excited, but I am a little disappointed that Max just talked about something that you need to send a news release so we can help promote it.
With our Laser Development Center, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's actually.
Get on that.
We had the open house along with our golf outing, which was a huge success. We had 120 golfers come out for
Nice.
to celebrate and help with iWarriors. For anybody that doesn't know, iWarriors is an organization that was started by Tim and Kim Bartz, and it's a very near and dear organization for the American Mold Builders Association, where they provide iPads for combat wounded veterans to help with PTSD and other things like that. So we were able to raise a ton of money for them. It's a great cause, and it was very exciting. And that was the first time we opened the doors to the R&D Laser Development Center. So it's very exciting. There will be a press release coming to you. We're having people write it now. And so there's going to be that one, and there's going to be press releases on the new equipment that we've developed,
Awesome.
and everything else. So we've taken full advantage of COVID to do some things that are a little bit new for us. So it's good and exciting.
Good for you.
Yeah. So I met Caitlin at the, I think it was the Plastics News, right? Executive Forum.
Yep.
One of the few events that you're allowed to go to.
Right.
And I only say that a little bit joking, because we've had a little bit back and forth on challenges of marketing and doing new things. And, the conversation today that we're having is all about the future of manufacturing in America and what that looks like for our businesses, and how we are trying to push the envelope forward, and what it looks like to start doing new and creative things. So now I think more than ever, Christina, you can speak to it. How much more difficult is it without the ability to meet and have those trade shows?
I know. First of all, it's sad because I was just talking to even Robert today at Intex. Like, I cannot wait to see and touch somebody. and shake a hand and just give somebody a hug. You know this community that I serve is just so all about that. So, and even just getting in shops to actually touch and feel stuff versus doing it virtually like this, it's tough, but it has taught new skills, right? We're all kind of on the same page here, doing the same thing, and it's a way to keep the stories continuing regardless of what's going on out there. You are able to do it. It's just a whole new medium. It's just not as fun. Fun.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Max, what are you seeing in that regard? Because again, you're another person that I see at trade shows all the time, and showing off the technology that Smart Attend has. And how are you feeling with all of this?
Yeah, I mirror Christina's comments right away, because one of the major things is that when we go to trade shows, when we go to events, conferences, anything of that sort, after a while you end up seeing the same people, right? And that's not a negative thing. That's actually a very positive thing. And I think that's a good idea to show, just how close knit and how tight everybody is in this community. So when we don't have those trade shows and when we don't have those conferences, it makes it tough, right? And so I've been trying to take some time out of my weeks, my days to at least pick up the phone and just call people and just to talk to them, right? Like Rich Olis, as both of you know very well, Steve Johnson from Mold Tracks. I've him and I have had a couple conversations through this, and there's definitely unfortunately a lack of that forward-looking excitement to these events, right? Showing off new products, showing off new systems, learning about new systems, learning about big new releases. The digital forefront of that is fine and it's working, but you still miss that in-person that in-person contact that in our industry is so important.
Yeah. Caitlin, I've seen you. I've met you at one trade show. Do you guys do those often?
We have been to a couple different shows. NPE was 2018 was our first time there, and that's kind of how I learned a little bit more about the Plastics Industry Association and got involved with Flip. So I do really enjoy attending those kind of things, just so I can see people my own age and, meet new people, get their perspective on the industry, because most of the people that I work with, because this is a family business, so it's a lot of guys my dad's age, and not as much fun as going to an in-person event and hanging out with people my own generation.
Well, and I guess well, I don't necessarily know that that's an ouch. Some of those older guys are fun. I mean,
that's what I mean. Exactly.
Yeah.
Some of them are.
Kevin Jongsma, I think that's how you spell his name, is watching on YouTube, and he thinks this is a great topic already. And we haven't even got started. So I got big hope for today. But, going off of what you were saying, Caitlin, about the generation gap, right? How is that for you? I mean, because I'm 42, I'll be 43 in November. So I feel like I'm in the middle. I'm like the bridge there. And sometimes you feel like you get along and fit in with the older generation, and sometimes it's the younger generation. And it's an interesting place to be, but I know for sure that the culture and the attitude of things has changed.
Yeah, and it can be difficult too, being part of a family business, because everybody sees me as the kid. And so it can be hard to get people to take me seriously when I'm trying to work with them. They say, well, why don't you just put your dad on the phone?
Yeah. Do you find that that's even more so because you're a female? I don't want to get into a whole,
I think it can be. And I feel like the more time that people spend with me, they're going to realize I've been doing this my entire life. So, I do understand what I'm talking about. I'm not just out here, walking around having a good time. Like I'm meeting customers' needs because I've been doing this for a long time, and I know what our inventory is, and I'm here to help people. So they have to get to know me, and then once they do, they realize I'm actually here, trying to get something done. I'm not just here to hang out.
And I asked that because I was talking to another friend of mine, and she is part of a family business as well, right? And she said that she very rarely mentions that she's part of a family business, because it's automatically looked at as just nepotism. Like, you don't know anything. You were just given the company. But
Oh, wow.
another family member who happens to be a male mentions that it's a family business all the time. And they go, oh, that's so great that you're taking over grandpa's business and blah, 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 blah. And it just seems like it's a double-edged sword for them.
Absolutely.
Christina, do you ever hear that or see it?
In terms of the family business, I think what you both said is true. I mean, it varies. Obviously, people are people, right? So depending on the environment, the culture of that shop, I've heard both sides of that. From personal experience, in terms of the female, I have never, I did not struggle these past 23 years within an industry that's completely male dominated. And when we started the magazine, the average age of our reader was 56. That was 23 years ago. So I grew up, I started the magazine, I was 27 years old. So the community embraced me right away. I felt like I learned everything from looking up to these, mostly men, but a lot of women too, I have to say. Like, I never felt I was plopped into an environment where I stood out. I never did. Maybe people will call me naive for that. Maybe it's my personality. And I get the feeling Caitlin's probably like me in terms of personality, where you have to have a certain personality to fit into that culture, right? You got to be able to take it. You got to give it, you got to take it, and be okay with that. And be confident in what you know and how you work with people and who you are. And I think you'll be fine. But the family thing, that is an interesting dynamic, because even you and I, Tony, have done past podcasts with other family shops. And again, it really, I don't know what the common denominator is, because it depends on that family's relationship and how they raised you. And like you're saying, I don't know, Caitlin, how long, I would imagine you've been there since you were younger. Like a lot of people there probably have known you since you were younger. That can be a good thing. That can be a bad thing. But I rarely have heard somebody just get plopped in a family business in the mold making community. I rarely have heard that. They've earned their time.
Yeah. And Kevin, who's on YouTube, says that we have a lot to learn from those older generations, and we need to learn it before it's lost. And that's something that I have heard a ton of, is that that tribal knowledge, right? That you can't learn, that you can't just sit down and teach somebody until the matrix is real and you can plug it into the back of their head and just download all the information.
Yeah. And what's troubling about that concept, which is coming up a lot during this year, 2020, not only is that tribal knowledge leaving, but at least, well, probably in North America, period, we went through a long time where we decimated any kind of education for manufacturing. So there is a real gap in terms of, even if people want to come into this world, where are they getting educated? That's when all the shops are doing it themselves, which, is costly and timely. So I keep hearing it over and over again, especially on the mold design side, that there, even in the actual university and trade programs, there's a gap in basic fundamental mold making knowledge. And with all people leaving, and even during COVID, people have had to cross train. There's been some quality issues, and maybe they're grabbing somebody from a different department to help over here, but they're lacking that fundamental. So I think that's an interesting, it's an interesting problem to try to solve. I know over at Gardner, I've heard it enough that we're looking into working with experts in the field that are kind of on their way out, that have all this tribal knowledge, that are passionate about the manufacturing community and want to develop programming to help fill this gap, to help educate this next generation. If it's not going to be in trade schools, and it's not going to be, first of all, it's probably going to have to be virtual, right? At this point. So, and we need it now. So I found that very interesting as of late. The past 6 months, I've been hearing it over and over again. Yeah,
that's a good point. Max, what are you seeing as the current state of manufacturing? I mean, as we're looking to the future, right? Before we look at the future, we have to look at where we are right now. So where do you think we are? I mean, you have experience in this. How long have you been doing it? How long have you been in our space? Dramco, atta girl.
I've been in this space, Tony. I'm on definitely the younger side of our industry, in my opinion. I've been in this space for about 5 years now, just over 5 years. And when I started in this industry, I knew absolutely nothing. I only knew what I watched on Discovery Channel and how it's made. And it's a good way to get set up into it. But, over the course of time, because I didn't know anything, because I was so young, I did have to deal, unfortunately, with a form of prejudice known as ageism, which is essentially not taking someone seriously based entirely off of their age rather than their personality, skill set. And knowledge is one thing. Knowledge just isn't given, it's gained, right? And so from what I've seen in the current state of manufacturing, you've already said it yourself, there's definitely a missing link of about 20 years or so, right? And it's slowly starting to come back towards our direction. But I know so many people, so many kids when I was a kid who went to university for accounting, business, law school, so on and so forth, right? And mold makers were really short, they're really far and few between. They still are today. What that's done is that's created a massive generation gap now in between this industry. We have the current management average age of management teams out there is starting to get closer and closer to retirement. But the younger generation, there isn't a supplemental amount of people who are going to be able to take over those positions and go down the natural path of learning, which is, getting more responsibility over time, doing a training course, getting certified, going to another level of responsibility, so on and so forth. They're either being thrusted right into management positions early on without proper experience or education, or they're getting frustrated because they see the current state of manufacturing, which is in a lot of ways very old school, is still maintaining that very old school approach, right? And so it's caused, unfortunately, a lack of a certain generation, which Tony, like you said, is your generation. I agree with you 100% that you're in the middle. And the fact that there even is a middle is an issue for our industry.
Yeah. Caitlin, how are you seeing it? I mean, dealing with employees and what do you feel that employees are experiencing in this time and where manufacturing is to them?
I think it's kind of hard because a lot of people my age seem like they care more about the environment and, trying to stand up for sea turtles and things like that. So they look at manufacturing as, killing the animals that live in the ocean. And, they see it as the manufacturer's problems when, I think it's a problem with where we live, that, it's not being made a priority, that recycling is taught in schools, or that, recycling is our highest priority. Instead, they want to turn around and stick it on the manufacturers and, blame us for people throwing their trash on the ground. And so I think it's hard to kind of pull the younger generation into manufacturing because they look at it as being awful, but they don't realize, like, if you need to go to the hospital, all of that stuff that they're going to use to keep you alive is plastic, and it's sanitary because it's, single use. And I think it's just, we need to educate younger people and make them understand that, like, plastics are sustainable and that it is, the most economic way to go forward. And we need to make it a priority that we, get our government to make recycling a higher priority. And, we need to make it a higher priority to teach the next generation that, we can use plastic to further things and, not fill our oceans with trash, but instead, recycle and keep moving forward and, make America, more manufacturing again.
So
It
do
used to
you
be
think,
Michigan.
go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, so do you think, with everything you said, I totally agree with. Do you think, and I don't know the answer to this, with COVID, right? Now I'm inside of it, so it seems obvious to me, but it's put a spotlight on manufacturing and mold manufacturing and molding and 3D printing. Like, manufacturing saved a lot of people, right? And got this, and who can't relate to those ventilators, respirators, the face shields? Do you think in these past 6-7 months that younger generation is able to understand a little bit better what manufacturing can do and want to be part of that cause? If they're looking for causes and things to make the world better, well, my God, we have done that this year, right?
So,
Absolutely.
Christina, I think you and I have talked about this before. I think right now would be a great time for somebody to write that article. I'm not that person because I don't have all the knowledge. But even with the COVID testing, right? What has to go into creating a test and why wasn't it done ahead of time? Because there's all these steps that need to be done, right? You have to source the material, you have to do the design work, you have to know what you're looking for. You have to do all this stuff and it takes time. We're in such a life cycle of immediacy, right? Everybody wants everything now, but some things take time. I would have been much more fearful if COVID came out and they went, "Hey, good news, we have a test." How? Like that means that somebody's planning ahead of time, right? I don't want to do a whole conspiracy theory thing, but there is so much that goes into building things. And going back to what Caitlin, you were saying about recycling, I've had this conversation, and it's one thing for people to say plastic is bad, you need to recycle more, but it's a personal accountability thing that needs to be taught to everybody, where manufacturing can only do so much, right? We can only do so much to help people to have better sustainability. But if people aren't going to be willing to take the time to go out and recycle their own products or throw their water bottle in the recycling bin instead of the garbage, that's not going to get done. On top of it, I mean, Christina, how many times do you hear people talk about how they need 100% pure white when they're molding, right? Yeah. You can't do that with recycled materials. This was one of the conversations we had at NPE. We did a recycling and sustainability conversation, and people need to understand that they can't have pure white. They can't have pure black or whatever it is if they're concerned about recycling, and it's going to cost a little bit more.
That's exactly.
Yeah. I'd like to jump in and provide a little bit of context on that one, Tony, because I think what you said is really, really quite interesting. And, relating it back to the topics at hand, which is, how does the young generation play into that? Right? How does the young generation play into the recyclability of it? How does it play into COVID-19? And how is the response, and how would it have been different? One thing that I really am a huge proponent of when it comes to younger generation is that many times a lot of people forget that kids today that are entering the workforce, kids today that are graduating, have had access to one of these for almost half, if not more than half of their life. That means the information that they have on hand and the skill set that they have built with using that device is unparalleled to anything else that I think humanity and society as a whole has been able to experience in the past. And so what I've seen when it comes to COVID-19 and playing into the sustainability part, it's a measured, it's a demographic that the younger generation is far more focused on sustainability, recyclability, as well as overall environmental friendliness. And what I've been able to see is that younger generation is bringing that mindset into manufacturing, because it's very much if the world's not going to fix it, then who's going to do it? Well, I'm going to try and do it myself, right? And it's this level of unparalleled access to information that this generation is growing up with, and just the outright drive to take over the torches that are being passed on from the older generation out, that I'm actually seeing quite a lot of investment and interest in sustainable manufacturing, whether that's using bioplastics, whether that's using pulp material. One of the Smartaton customers makes packaging material out of completely compostable materials, right? And so it's a replacement for, bubble wrap, so on and so forth, right? However, it's still using plastic. So it's really interesting to see them actually take this amount of approach, engineer these new ideas. And I think my opinion and theory is a lot of it is driven by the ability to access so much information at such a young age. At any point in time, we can learn how to recycle right away just by Google searching right on our phone. And I think that's really interesting for the future of this industry.
And I think learning how to recycle is one thing. Being willing to pay for it is another thing, right? It's Absolutely. The same conversation that we have when we talk about, it's so great that American manufacturing is growing and thriving, and we want that to continue on and not send things back to China, right? Mm-hmm. Or wherever. We don't have to pick on China, but we have a higher standard of living for people in our country. So you can't pay them, $5 an hour to work, which means that the product is going to have to cost more, which means people are going to have to be willing to spend a little bit more money for a quality product and not just buy the cheapest thing on Amazon.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And we're seeing that shift, right? The best example is automotive, right? EVs, Teslas, Nissan Leafs, whatever they may be, are growing at such a rapid pace. although they're very cost prohibitive for most people, especially younger folks, that is changing over time, right? And as as these new processes for recycling, although still is very cost prohibitive as well, I think we're going to see that change over time as well, as more people enter the market. Competitiveness drives innovation, and that innovation eventually drives price down to the common person, right? And so I'd love to actually, if you're okay with it, Tony, I'd love to ask Christina a question, because I know MoldMaking Technology puts a very big focus on their top 30 under 30, right?
Yeah.
A very big focus on the younger generation. And I would love to hear Christina's perspective on setting up the next generation for success. What do you see that demographic, Christina, from your perspective? What are some of the things you've seen that are really interesting that are going to allow these top 30 under 30s to be successful for decades?
It's interesting. The biggest thing that I've seen in the past few years has been actually this, I'll call them the seasoned, like the seasoned generation and the next generation probably have more in common than they think they do, right? We did a pilot cross-generational mentorship program last year, and it was six people, 3 different pairs, and I kind of journeyed them through 6 months, meeting with them every month, and they were all different walks of life. Some within sales, some within manufacturing. 2 women, a minority woman, a minority man. Like, we tried to make it diverse and following them, right? But just on the age alone, they ended up realizing they had a lot more in common than they thought they did. But some of them had more challenges. It's all about communication, right? So if you're going to look at learning from each other, and that's what this is all about, right? Which comes down to communication. And it could be tough in a traditional shop environment. We'll say that, right? Although being out in the field the past 10, 15 years, there's more non-traditional than you would think. I think a lot of these mold makers get a bad rap for being stuck in like a time warp, when a lot of them are doing very innovative things when it comes to workforce and being open-minded, which is what it takes to communicate with each other. You have to recognize that your differences and embrace them. So I think mentorship, which I know Flip is a big, is all into that too. I believe that is the key, because with true mentorship, you are learning, whether that's an age difference, I don't care what the difference is, why you're being paired up. We'll take it by the age thing. You have to be open to learn from each other, because just as you brought up the phone, right, the technology, to put it bluntly, that alone, they can help the seasoned person advance their business just by being open to let them show you things that you're not going to have the patience to learn right now, right? Let them do it and let them own it within your company and let them build that portion, and everybody wins. So I do believe it's mentoring. It's looking at that word, however you define it. I think a lot of shops do their own kind of informal mentoring. They're not going to call it that, but a lot of them, I see the way they're talking about their next generation. I'm like, gosh, that's what they're doing. They're doing a great job. Formalize it, make it something that happens every week, every day, where you're talking to each other and learning from each other's strengths and weaknesses. So I think that's the biggest thing, but there are so many aspects there's so many aspects of the generational thing, because even going through COVID, right? Not many people want to talk about this, but mentorship is a solution to this also, I think, is the mental health issue that has come from this COVID within the workplace, right? You can, and I've learned this on a personal level in a hard way with people that I know and love. People that you think you know very well that would fall on one side or the other of the mask, we'll call it. It's a very divisive topic, right? And I've learned to not really talk about that and to not judge somebody and allow them to feel, right? That word feeling, feel however they are. The bottom line is, no matter how they feel as a shop, it's going to impact your business. You have to manage this. You have to make your employees, and that might not be a generational thing or not. I'm hearing out there that the younger generation is having a more difficult time coping with the issue of going back to the workplace and feeling safe and the all uncertainty of what's going on in the world. I'm hearing they're challenged more. So the seasoned people, you have got to address this. You have to make the culture be comfortable where they feel like they can come to you and talk about how they feel, because in the end, that is going to impact productivity and it's going to impact your business, and they're not going to stick around. I'm also hearing the generation will look for the culture where they do feel comfortable about mental health issues. And I know it's a weird thing to bring up, but it is real. Like, it is happening in these shops, and then you've got to acknowledge it. So that is changing your culture in a big way. And I think mentorship, setting up some sort of mentorship program between the season, the next will definitely help with that. You're going to form a bond and a relationship where you inevitably feel comfortable enough to talk about how you feel about awkward issues, right? Because who wants to go into work and say, "Oh my God, no one's wearing masks today," or they're not far enough away from me, or they're not taking the precautions I really think they should. Well, you need to be able to say that to your employer, right?
Yeah.
And if you don't feel like you can, it's not a good situation. So there are two things that have stuck out as of late.
And Brenda from Hasco is watching, and she says, "Be a mentor. We will not all live forever, and the next generation will need our knowledge. Do not let the tool making die out with the current workforce. It only takes a few moments of time." I think it takes a little bit more than a few moments of time, but it takes patience and understanding and a shared goal of passing on knowledge and taking on knowledge, right? And the seasoned generation can't be so stuck in their ways where they say, "I know best, we're always doing it my way," and actually be open to answering some questions. I think one of the things that, maybe my parents didn't appreciate me asking when I was younger was why, right? And as a parent, most parents don't appreciate when their kid is like, why? But that's part of learning and understanding. And if we're patient enough to just give that why now, there's a good chance we don't have to give it down the line, but it's just because those people are curious and they want to learn and they want to understand why they're doing it instead of just because I said so.
Yeah. And I think a lot of the manufacturers too, especially mold builders, they're very proud, of what they do. They like to talk about what they're doing and how they're doing it. So I like to think or believe that it comes easier to them to be a mentor just on that alone. They want to share what they know because they're proud of what they were able to do. They're craftsmen. They're skilled, talented craftspeople.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. And on that mentorship note, I love the mentorship side of things. And Caitlin and Christine, both of you brought up FLIP, which stands for the Future Leaders in Plastics, as part of the Plastics Industry Association, right? And I won't touch on this for too long, but it has a mentorship program, and that mentorship program in FLIP is designed to pair up a FLIP member who has to be younger than the age of 40. That's the criteria of it. It pairs that up with somebody else who wanted to be that mentor. So you got a mentee and a mentor, right? And the idea of it is exactly to address the generation gap issue. And Christina, you're right. The mold making industry is a very proud industry, right? I know you talked to Robert Gropp from Intex Tooling this morning. Robert is a huge proponent of internships and co-op students. And the reason why he is that is because it creates and permeates a culture within an organization to show that we're okay taking time out of our day to teach somebody else about this aspect or that aspect. Because ultimately, who benefits? The organization benefits from a cultural point of view, showing that the management team is willing to put aside some of their tasks and spend some time with younger folks and try to get them up to speed. But it's also very important from an employee engagement perspective, because it allows employees then to have the opportunity to tell them if they're stressed out, to tell them if they have anxiety, to tell them, I joined this industry because my dad told me to, and I'm starting to like it, but I don't really know where I want to go in it, right? It creates that relationship that I think is so important. And unfortunately, I see a lot of companies really don't put a lot of weight on that relationship, because what's the net gain? The net gain is you have a better corporate culture at the end of the day, which then translates into a financial aspect.
Yep.
Caitlin, how are you seeing that as a family business? Are you seeing that with you being more involved, there is more attention to hearing employees, listening to feelings or opinions or their input to what you guys are doing as an organization?
I think it is definitely different between the generations. I find that people my age communicate so completely differently. We have been on computers and instant messaging each other and texting each other, since we were in high school. So our communication style is completely different. So it does help that I'm able to try to, communicate on behalf of the younger people towards management. But it's a process of both, the management and then people my age coming together and understanding that we communicate differently. I understand that my dad has been doing this for 30 years. So when he explains something to me, it might feel like I'm in kindergarten and my teacher is like telling me everything, every single step, but that's how he communicates. He wants to make sure that I completely understand. And then, I try to make him understand. We like to communicate. We all got Slack on our phones, which is just an app where you basically can text back and forth when there's an issue. And I put it on his phone and I said, have you not been seeing any of the messages that people are sending you? And he's like, I don't check that thing. And I'm like, well, that's how they communicate. They're not, do you want them to stop what they're doing and try to come find you? And if you're not at your desk, they can't call your phone. So this is a way that we can bridge the gap. And, you're going to have to bend a little bit and we're going to have to bend a little bit. And when we meet in the middle, that's how we're going to find good communication.
And that's such a good point, because it's a unique method to get into texting, whether that's Slack or just texting through the phones, right? We have Microsoft Teams set up now at work for that same purpose instead of a second application like Slack. And it's like, I set up this whole thing for our drivers to be able to go and put in all the locations where they're at, blah, blah, blah. And now the fight was to get them to text that information. Nobody wanted to text it. And then we set up Teams and now they all want to text it. So it's like, we got one step and that's fine. I'm going to take it. I'm not going to fight and say, no, you have to do this on Teams. Texting is working. We're going to do that. Yeah. But it's getting over that hump of doing something new and being open to new ideas that is rare.
Yeah, I have another angle to this, and I would be curious about your opinion. So there's also quite a difference in work-life balance. And it seems like, to me, it is the next generation has got it right. And I think this more seasoned generation can learn. And I'm pushing toward more of the seasoned generation, and I struggle with that myself. And I admire, sometimes in the beginning, I think I was mad.
Yep.
And then the more you get used to it, because they're not changing, we need to change. I started to become envious of the way they're able to turn it off, and they're able to spend their time with their family or with their boyfriends or with their friends or volunteering, whatever they're doing. It's not all work all the time. And I was curious, like Caitlin and Max, to on you, Tony, like, do you see that within your shop environments?
Yeah, Caitlin, if you want to go first. I love this question, by the way.
Yep, I agree.
Yeah, so my dad is the hardest worker that I know. He never stops. And how we actually kind of got into this facility in the parts business, he used to be a broker, and so he just sold machines. He just sat in an office, and it was a 9-to-5 kind of thing. And then when the recession happened in 2008, he almost lost his business. And I saw him like change into a completely different person, where like he lost the suit and tie and he had on, his black Ideal Machinery t-shirt and his black jeans. And he's out on the floor just like ripping machines apart to try to find parts that we could supply to our customers because they couldn't afford to buy a new machine. And it's like, I've seen him pull himself up by his bootstraps and just accomplish so much. And so I feel like he has sort of instilled that into myself and my brother that works here as well. It's one of those things that it's kind of hard to turn off. And so I'm a middle child, so I'm like a mediator, and I really try to kind of mediate them like, hey, listen, we're with the family right now, and work's going to be there on Monday. So let's focus on this. And at first it was difficult, but I feel like, my dad does realize that, hey, we have to live our life. And of course we're going to keep the business running and we're going to make our customers a priority, but we do have to live life. We can't be up here at 11 o'clock at night because we're not going to be good for the next day at work. So, it was a learning process, but I feel like we have a really great balance now.
And if you're watching, put it in the chat. What are your feelings on work-life balance? Because we have seasoned and we have newbies. We got the whole gamut online on the different applications here. We're on LinkedIn, Facebook, and YouTube, all going at the same time. So put in the chat how you guys are feeling about work-life balance and where you fit in on that. Max, where are you at?
Yeah, I love this topic because this is a big topic of conversation actually within Smart Attend all the time. So funny enough, actually, Robert Gropp just texted me on my phone because he's listening live right now, and he said, "Oh wow, work-life balance, need that. I can never shut off." Right, and I feel that pain. I feel that pain of never being able to shut off, and I go through it all the time. But I'm a huge believer in that we have to be honest with ourselves. If we're running around telling everyone I work 20 hours a day and I never shut off, I'm always business focused, my first thing I say to someone like that is, wow, I really actually feel bad for you, because why do we work? Right?
For our
Why
families.
why do we do this? Why do we sit, and sometimes put 15, 16 hours on one day? Why do we do that? It's because we want a life to live, and we want families to live the life that we want them to. And does that mean that you'll never be home and they'll never see you? Right? It's a balance that is so important, and a lot of it plays into or increase in depression or increase in anxiety across every generation, right? And really not putting a big focus on making sure that you have an outlet somewhere, and you're taking that vacation time, and you're communicating with your managers saying, you know what, I've been going hard for 4 or 5 weeks straight. I feel really burnt out. Burnout is a much bigger financial strain on an organization than a couple of days off here and there. And I think that it's, the responsibility of all of us on this call who are leaders in our organizations to effectively communicate that work is not about, and life's not about being at work 24/7. Sure, we may get that part to the customer earlier. They may be happy, but what point is it if we're not happy, right? And that is what is so important to me about a work-life balance, because if you're not happy at home, how can you ever be effective and happy at work?
See, my problem is that work is my hobby as well. So, I don't go scuba diving, or I don't go do those other things. It's work, and it's a game for me at the same rate, right? Like you mentioned earlier, Max, that's your gaming headset. I don't do the gaming. To me, like, this is real life Sims, right? I want to grow this business and see that the score keep going up. So for me, it's work, but it's also a hobby, and it's something that I think is really fun and enjoyable for me to keep doing. Now, I don't expect everybody to feel that same way. I know people have a much healthier work-life balance than I do. My kids are also 14 and 11. So, if I go home early, they're not there, or they're doing schoolwork, or they're doing their own thing. I was talking to my wife about, we just finished the golf outing, and how I was feeling a little bit burnt out, like you were talking about. And, the need to take a couple days off. And she said, do it. And I said, why? You have to work. The kids are in school. I'm going to sit at home by myself, which is going to be even more depressing. Why do I want to do that? So back to work it is.
Yeah. And even though I'm younger than 30 years old myself, right? And for me, when Smart Attend was started, and I was the first employee of Smart Attend, my job, just like Christina's job when she was 27, was to grow something out of nothing, right? And what the byproduct of doing that is that you end up spending an exorbitant amount of time doing that, right? Driving across North America, right? In my case, it was putting prototypes in the backseat of a rented Toyota Corolla and just hitting the road and not seeing, my girlfriend for sometimes a few weeks at a time. And sure, it grew the business quick, but it taught me a valuable lesson. And the lesson is that there's got to be a way to balance not only work life, but actually being able to properly communicate and properly do your job, even if you want to work from home for one day, for 2 days,
Exactly.
right? Because you will never get that time back that you lose, because time is a forward moving motion. And so it's about making sure that you can still get everything done that you want to get done, like it's your passion, Tony, right? And Smart Attend is my passion as well. But I always, whenever I'm feeling this burnout, I always ask myself the one question: why are we actually doing this and trying to make a business go, right?
Yeah. And Kevin says that, his kids are home from school and they see how many hours he works per day, but he has a hard stop at 5 p.m. no matter what. Have dinner with the family and relax. No business after 5 p.m.
That's good. That's
Mhm.
admirable. So for Caitlin and Maxwell, and you too, Tony, how many people are still, if ever, working remotely?
Um, I'll go first. So working remotely, we probably, if I have to think about this, we do a bit of alternation. So I allow my staff to work from home a couple days of the week if they want to, especially the development team, because they usually plug in and don't unplug for, 14 hours, 15 hours some days, right? So
That's my
for me,
point.
so for
That's my
for
point.
me, I'm the way I look at it is like this is when you have a deadline and an objective and a project you have to finish, right? Then finish that project on that deadline and meet that objective. Do I care if you do it at the office? Do I care if you do it at home?
Right.
Do I care if you do it on the beach in the Bahamas? No,
Right.
because I
Just
don't want
get
to
it
spend
done.
my time. Yeah, I just get it done. We're here for the result, not for the process to get to the result, right? Although that's important too. But working from home, working at the office, for me, it's an employment benefit in a way for us to keep looking for that talent by having the flexibility. So I would say probably about 20 to 30% of my staff is working at home on any given day during the week. However, like Caitlin, we use Slack as well and we communicate all day long. Yeah,
Do you think that remote has helped your employees' work-life balance, or has it made it worse? Because once you start working from home, and I work from home full time.
Mm.
It's hard to turn it off. So I was curious as to this COVID time, if a bunch of people are still working from home, have you seen that change in your companies?
Fantastic question. And I might take a couple seconds here to think of the answer properly. But as
Well,
far as sorry, Tony.
I was going to say, while you're thinking on that,
Yeah.
I have some thoughts, because it is much more difficult to work from home and stay focused. And I think part of the issue from a leadership perspective is understanding that it's changed from 8 straight hours or whatever your day is, right, to get the work done.
Mhm.
So it's very difficult, in my opinion, to have an hourly person work from home, because they have to keep track of those hours. A salaried person knows the job that they have to do, and they have to get it done in the hours that they have to get it done, whether that means that they have to spend some time with their kids on Zoom, doing e-learning from 9 to noon, and then work from 6 at night till 9, or whatever they need to do to make sure that the work is done that day. I think what you're saying, Christina, makes a lot of sense, that it has changed that work-life balance a little bit. And I know from when I had our own graphic design company, my father would never understand, why are you leaving in the middle of the day to take your son skating? Don't do that. Like, you should be working. And then we would work at night. It's a totally different atmosphere and attitude to be able to do those things. And I think that an older generation wants to see the person working. They want to be able to walk past the office and go, all right, there they are. They're working. Cool. It's hard for them to recognize, especially with kids at home sometimes, that they are still working. They are still getting the results. They are still doing those things. But I think that's where, as leaders, we have to have complete and total trust in the people that we have working for us. And if we don't, that's a much bigger issue. Did that give you enough time, Max?
It did. It did. It gave me enough time to be able to think of this, which is Caitlin, do you want to give your answer first?
I knew you were going to say that. I knew it.
Yeah,
Caitlin, what do you have to say?
I am the only employee that works remotely. So,
Okay.
I do think that sometimes it can be kind of hard to turn things off, but I only get paid by commission. So, I am always on, because that's how I make money. So, even last week when I was on vacation, I was responding to emails and people on LinkedIn, because if I don't respond to my customers, they're just going to go somewhere else. But, most of our stuff here is more hands-on. So people are here in the facility, but my dad is very much that sort of old school way, where he wants to see you doing work. He wants to see you at your desk physically on the phone. And it's kind of hard for him to understand. Like, I might be in another state and going into another facility or going to the executive forum or whatever else, but I am working. even though you can't physically see me doing it.
And it's a very difficult thing to balance. I mean, you mentioned vacation, and my wife and I went to the Chip and Joe place, where Magnolia, right? We were down in Waco, Texas, and the whole time we were there, I was taking phone calls and emails and texting. I mean, we were in antique stores, and I don't care. I was there strictly to support her and her fun.
Oh, how
But
nice of you.
it made her happy. But at the same point, I had stuff that I needed to take care of, and people back in the office are going, just stop, you're on vacation. And I can't, because it's mine. We're growing this. I can't just shut it off like Caitlin, right? If you don't do it and nobody else is doing it, and you get paid on your commission and the growth of the company and what's happening, that's a decision you have to make. Are you going to take that week and do nothing and potentially lose that ground that you've built, or stay engaged and keep moving that ball forward?
It's a really hard, it's a really hard balance to achieve, especially when you're in a commission-based position, right? Because it's directly related to your ability to either pay your bills or not.
Well, and these things, right? You have to admit, this just made it impossible not to be connected. I mean, this is it.
Yeah.
You have no excuse. It isn't. To me, this is the root of it all for me personally.
Yeah. Is
this, because everybody knows they can get a hold of anybody at any time. So
yeah.
And I think it 100% depends on the person, right? Kevin says that as a mold designer working remotely, I can get more work done in 6 hours at home than I can 10 hours at the office. My wife has that same issue, because people are always coming in and asking her questions and doing those things. So she's much more productive when she's at home than having to stop what she's doing, answer a question, fix a problem, solve something, and just be able to dial in and focus on what she's doing. I'm the opposite. I can't do that. I have way too many distractions at home, and I'm better in the space that I'm supposed to be doing work in.
That would be an interesting survey during this time to find out overall in manufacturing, first of all, how many positions are able to be at home, right? But did productivity get better or worse? Like, what did they learn from that? And did it get better? So now that's they made that change. Now that's actually, they are open to being more flexible, so employees can work from home, which could attract a next generation person that did it before, right? Who knows?
That's right. Yeah, for sure.
That's interesting.
That's right. And definitely it depends on the position in the job, right? Like a mold builder will not be able to, build a mold in their living room. If they can, I mean, that must be a pretty great looking living room. But one of the interesting things that I've found during this mess, we'll call it that, was, even though being a technology company, we do have added benefits and the ability that we can basically log in, we can go on Zoom, we can go on Teams, we can go on Slack, we can, analyze databases, we can, work to provide our customers the service that they need us to provide, and everything, that's fine. But because we're a young company, and because being a young company, we try to be very dynamic and try to always work on some really cool next generation stuff. What you miss with working at home is kind of what I call it, the war room.
Yes.
Kind of decision making, where basically you've got, a couple people at board table, I'm there with my arms on, standing up, we're making decisions, we're talking about customers, we're doing this, we're analyzing, we're this. You miss that with working at home. And the effect that that's had on the staff at SmartAttend is, yes, productivity actually was unchanged. In a lot of ways, it was actually increased because we put in a system like Slack to help us communicate better when we didn't have that at the office. However, as the months went on, and here in Canada, the lockdown lasted for months and months and months, to the point where the office was closed and the lights were off and everything, because that was what we had to do. What we started to see was a lack of almost a perceived positivity. It's almost like back to what you said, Christina, about the mental health aspect of all of this, right? When you miss that human person-to-person interaction, especially the younger employees that I have who don't, have a family with them. They don't have a wife or kids or anything like that. They are just by themselves in their house. You start to see almost like a wet blanket being laid over top of some people as that isolation starts to get to them. and it starts to take an effect on just the tone of their voice, right? And that is when we started to see productivity drop. It was like a 6-week, transitionary period where we were doing great, and all of a sudden we started to just slowly see people's moods change, people's attitudes started to decrease, and it was not to do with the extreme challenge we had in front of us dealing with being a technology company during COVID, but it was actually really to do with the lack of person-to-person human interaction that made it more difficult.
And not knowing when it was going to end, right? It's
not
the
knowing when it's
uncertainty of how long is this going to be?
That's right, exactly, and going from seeing the team going out to lunch, working together 5 days a week, to all of a sudden silence at home unless you're on a meeting. It's hard, and it was tough. And I think that that's something that every generation struggled with, not just the younger one, not just the seasoned one. But it was a definite byproduct that I saw, and it was unfortunate. But that changed as soon as we called our employees back.
And Timothy Stoll is on YouTube from Armin, and he's agreeing with a lot of what we have to say about do something you love for work, have people you love outside of work. The balance will find itself.
Mm-hmm.
And he agrees with Kevin on a lot of his points. And I just think that those generations I think that's where COVID helped out, right?
Mm-hmm.
We were talking earlier about how it's a crappy situation, but there's a lot of growth points in there. I think because of COVID, a lot of those other generations, older generations, seasoned people, had to let people work from home. Mm-hmm. They had to have their mind opened up to the opportunity, the strengths of being able to do that. And because of that, I think so many businesses are going to grow. We have our mostly the girls, the office girls that are here are working from home. We don't know how long. A couple of them, or Jessica comes in a couple times a week. She comes in the morning before her kid's school starts, do her stuff. Vanessa has not been able to come home because she has some things going on at home with her family. But at the same point, we're being very understanding, which allows us the opportunity then down the line, say one of their kids gets sick with the flu. It's not even anything, life-threatening, but they can't come in. Right now, they have the ability to work from home where that would not have been set up before.
I keep hearing that they're calling it like COVID. It's the great accelerator. Like a lot of things that are happening were going to happen anyway. Right. We were just forced to do it. And I really like that perspective. Even when it comes to technology, right? Automating, training, working from home, getting up to speed on different ways to communicate, like all of that had to happen at some point. It was just forced on us.
Yep. And Charles Daniels is joining us on Facebook too. He says, yo. That's all he says. Yo. That's what he has to contribute.
Yo.
Hi, Charles.
But I'm sure he has tons of thoughts on the ideas of working from home and that generation gap.
I know that he gets up at 4:00 in the morning.
Yeah, I
heard that.
We did CrossFit one time together. It was fun. It was fun.
I'd like to ask another question.
Go.
And to everybody, including myself, but I won't answer first. So what kind of advice, guys, do you think we could give both the seasoned generation and the younger generation on how to deal with each other?
Caitlin, take it.
I would say that communication would be, key. I think that the older generation, the seasoned generation, they are stuck in their ways. This is how how it was when I was your age, and so this is how I'm going to treat you. And we've had a huge change in, like I said, with technology and everything. The way that my generation communicates is so vastly different from how the older generation communicates. And we all need to realize that we need to meet in the middle. But if you want to bring in new people and you want to keep them and be able to invest in them and see them, make a difference in your company, you're going to have to get to their level. You're going to have to understand that, you maybe have to be nice to people. That can be, my dad had one time stood up in front of everybody and yelled at them, if I tell you to pick up a broom, you better sweep the floor. Just because he was tired of people saying, well, that's not my job. And it's like, you have to realize that things have changed and people are taking other people's feelings into consideration more, and the communication style has changed. I feel like people my age, we like check in on each other and we ask how they're doing, whereas some older people are just like, hey, good morning, and they keep going. And that they're not trying to be rude, but it can come off as rude, like, wow, I can't believe it, he never even asks me how I am.
Right.
And
They don't
so
know they're
I think,
supposed to.
yeah, and so I think it's both sides recognizing that they are going to have to change a little bit to try to meet the other person in the middle.
I think for me, I'm very fortunate because my father has always done that, right? Like he made a point every morning when he came into work to go in and have a small conversation with everybody to see how their day is, see what's going on. And he's done that forever, right? He really understands and values the importance of relationships and how if your team knows that you care about them on a personal level, they're going to care about you and their job much more because they realize that they're not just a number, right? And it's a lot of investment that we put into our people and our teams. Charles says that, Caitlin, you're absolutely right that you got to find common ground. Communication is right. People need to form relationships so that there's trust, right? And that's his take. I 100% agree with that. You have to have empathy and you have to have trust and understanding that, you don't know what people are going through outside of these doors. And we spend so much time in the buildings that we're in that we need to have those conversations to find out like what's going on at home. Are you doing okay? What's going on with your kids? How are they handling e-learning? There's a lot of stress. There's a lot more stress now, I think, than there was before. And going way back to the beginning of the conversation about mental health, there's still the stigma of telling people that you're stressed out or dealing with something. And I think we just all need to be understanding with each other and know that we got a lot of stuff going on. Mm-hmm. And, even though I don't show it all the time, because you don't need to know all my stuff, you got your own stuff. It's okay to let people in. Right. And that's one of the things that I've tried doing. I don't run around the shop telling people all my problems, but if I see somebody is having an off day and I start talking to them about things, then I relate if they're hesitant to share, then I'll tell them, this is what I got going on at home. I feel you. I understand your pain. They're like, really? You do? So they don't realize that they can let down their wall a little bit and have those conversations.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I couldn't agree more, Tony, honestly. It's so important because, when you see an employee who's like this at their desk, I'm going to move my camera, they're like, oh, they have this look on their face like, oh man, just they're from the manager's perspective, like, look at guy something over there. Look, he's unproductive. He's just sitting there. He looks bummed out. I'm going to go over there and tell him how to do his job better, right? It's like, guy number one, you got to do this. Like, you're sitting around, I'm paying you, you're this and that. My advice, my advice to those people who go and do that, who have the understanding that, no, I'm paying this person so they do everything that I tell them to do. And I don't care if they're stressed out. I don't care if they're this or that. You know what? My advice is, sometimes all you got to do is pull up a chair and instead of talking, how about just listen? Right, just listen, because sometimes you'll understand a lot about people, and sometimes they have an issue that's going on at their home that may have nothing to do with work, but just opening up that relationship and opening up that kind of approach, it benefits the organization because now it's a teamwork thing, right? And I'm going to share my problems. I want to hear yours too, and I understand.
Max, you are 100% right, but that is, and Christina, being in shops as long as you have been, that is a new concept for people. Just to like take a break, right? Like Caitlin, the bell went off, right? It was not uncommon for our shop. You had the bell went off at 9:30, the bell went off at noon, the bell went off at 2:30, and those were the times that you took break.
You want roasted chicken?
My father wants to know if I want, you going to wait for me?
It is lunch, isn't it?
Yeah.
This is a lunch conversation.
Yeah.
It is. It's a chat and chow.
Yeah.
And yeah. I agree with all of you. I think the biggest takeaway and advice is what you're all saying. You have to treat the employee's whole person. And that is going to be a challenge for a traditional shop I do see it changing. They have to be more flexible. They have to be open-minded to change. I would love to talk about, do a future chat and trail and talk about social media, because a lot of what you guys are saying, what I'm discovering is who you are as a company is oftentimes not reflected in your social media or on your websites. And I think that's a challenge to attract the next generation. And I think we should talk about that some other time.
I think we can definitely set that up. I mean, maybe that's next month we sit there and tackle that, because as a branding person, right, you should brand based on who you are, not who you want people to believe you are.
Yeah, exactly.
But that,
and
like you said, we'll get to that.
Yeah, and this all falls into that. If you're not a company, if your website or social media doesn't give the feel of what we're talking about, and I don't know how to convey that. I don't have all the answers, but someone's got to figure that out, because people are looking for jobs, right? And you want to attract the best people. Well, what we're talking about is very important, and it's not going away. So how do you convey that socially, digitally?
Yeah, and I think what's nice and bad at the same time, Christina, you and I run into this problem all the time. We've been talking for an hour and 6 minutes. It doesn't feel like an hour and 6 minutes, but it's an hour and 6 minutes. And at some point we have to stop, because we'll just keep talking all day.
And I got a job to do.
Yeah. And that's the other part. Like, people don't realize that this is a job, right? Right now, we are all doing a very important part of our job, which goes back to the social media thing that we can talk about at a later date. But work has changed, life has changed, things have changed. So before we get out of here, if you're still listening, at the end of our show, we say a prayer. So if you want to put a prayer request, if you have one, in the comments, you have time to do that now before we wrap up with some final thoughts. So if you're still there and you have something specific you would like us to pray for, go ahead and throw that in the chat. But before we get out of here, what are takeaways that you guys have for maybe somebody that's getting into the industry, and maybe somebody that's getting out of the industry, and how they can meet in the middle?
Mentorship.
Yeah, for sure. My final words and thoughts on this topic, because I am quite passionate about it, are really these things, right? First of all, I second mentorship. Mentorship is huge, right? As well as allowing younger employees, if you have younger employees working with you, allowing them to have the opportunity to maybe step outside, whether it's the location that they're working at or outside of their comfort zone. But there do exist groups out there that do allow for this. And the Future Leaders in Plastics and the Plastics Organization is a very, very dynamic and great group that exists purely to tackle this issue, right? And there's a huge amount of networking opportunities, but mentorship's a big focal point of that group specifically. So my advice would be for the younger generation coming into this industry, first of all, don't approach a conversation with someone who's been doing this for 30 years by saying the phrase, well, let me tell you how this works. Don't do that, right? But more seriously, it's okay to go to people like John Bazzelli. It's okay to go to the people like Rich Olis, like Steve Johnson, the people that are educators that have been doing this for decades and decades, and just sitting down and saying, hey, I'm new in this industry. I want to hear your perspective. What was your journey? How did you become an educator? What are some of the things you see? And create a relationship based on the willingness to actually want to learn about what people do and how this industry moves and evolves, right? On the same breath, for the older generation, the seasoned generation, the seasoned generation also should understand that the younger, new people coming in this industry have a very different way that they grew up. They had access to information. They had access to basically the ability to Google the solution to any problem whatsoever. They bring a humongous amount of skill sets that a lot of companies still are not very aware of or even know how to fully utilize. And it's not about laziness, the stereotypes of millennials, who get a participation trophy. At the end of the day, they're people just like you. They want to learn. So if you give them the chance to learn, then they're going to take, hopefully, that opportunity and grow and become extremely valuable employees for your organization going forward. And that creates that relationship and that culture within your company.
That's
well
really
said.
nice. Yeah.
Thanks.
And I guess lastly, I'll just say about communication, we have to listen if we're going to communicate. And I feel like both both sides. We need to listen to each other. So you get these younger people who somebody starts trying to explain something to them and they just sort of tune them out and they don't listen. Or you get older people who the younger person is trying to explain how they feel or their work-life balance or whatever, and that person's just waiting for them to stop talking so they can tell them what to do. Everybody needs to listen to what the other people are saying, because when you actually listen to what somebody's saying, well, then you can change your behavior to try to communicate better with them and, move the company forward.
And I think communication is key. I'll echo that, but it's the right communication, right? It's the tone that you're talking to people. It's the eye contact that you have with people, the actions that you're displaying while you're sharing the information, because anybody can say, I told them what to do. And that is not the right approach. I mean, nobody wants to hear it that way. And one of the things that I try and do, even as a parent, is stop myself from talking, because you can over explain something to death and then nobody wants to hear you anymore. And maybe that's a man thing where it goes quickly from assistance and instruction to nagging. There's a difference there. And we can only take in so much information at one time. Max, are you the same way? I don't know, but I can only hear something so many times before I'm like, okay, I got it. Are you done? Enough. And I think we just need to be better about realizing that communication is essential, and you have to talk to people in a way that makes them want to listen to you, and find value in what you have to say, instead of thinking this guy's just an a-hole and I don't want to work with him.
Mm-hmm.
Mutual respect.
Agreed.
Yeah. And that's another one, right? Respect, mutual respect for each other, and realizing that everybody has something to offer in the platform, whether or not you know it or not.
Mm-hmm. Agreed.
Agreed.
All right. Does anybody have anything else they want to add before we shut this show down?
No, thank you for having us.
Yeah,
Right.
thank you.
Tony.
And I want to thank everybody for the comments that came in, the questions that came in. We're going to do this again. I really like the topic that we had and the issues that we brought up, and I think we can definitely keep this going. Christina, I know you have a very busy schedule doing your own video conversations, but the four of us will find some more things that we want to talk about on these topics. But before we get out of here, I'm going to pray for us real quick, because I think that's one of the most positive things that you can do in this show is about positivity and not negativity. So, Heavenly Father, thank you for bringing us together. Thank you for the platform that allows us to have community and connection without being in connection. Thank you that you provide ways for us, even when we don't see them, that you're always there when we don't know that you are. We pray for our government officials, that you would give them wisdom, that you would give them strength, that they would be able to help us navigate through this difficult time, and that we would trust them, and that we would know that they're in power because you put them in power for your specific reasons, and reasons that we may not understand. We pray for people who are struggling with work, struggling with things at home, struggling with stress, that you would give them strength and understanding and patience with the people around them, and that we would continue to grow through this time. And we just thank you for everything that you give us, all the opportunities, all the struggles, because you're making us better through them. And most importantly, we thank you for your son, Jesus, and it's in his name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
All right, guys,
Excellent.
that has been a good conversation. I appreciate your time. I appreciate everything that you guys are doing for the industry, and for, just your willingness to share information and help people grow in that way. So thank you.
Thank you,
you.
Tony. Thanks a lot, guys.
Thanks.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye,
Bye-bye.
guys.
All right, everybody. I just want to thank you for listening, for watching, for being part of the Manufacturing Alliance, for being part of our conversation, for being part of the show, for giving us an hour and 15 minutes of your time. I know time is valuable, and I hope that you found some value in this conversation, some joy, something to take away from. And I would really appreciate it if you shared that information with somebody, if you invited them to watch the show next time, or just pass this link along. Our goal is to help grow the manufacturing space in the United States, and just make people's lives a little bit better. So on behalf of myself, Christina, Max, Caitlin, I want to say thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. Take care and God bless.